Think about the last time you opened a bottle of medicine. You probably did not think twice. You twisted the cap, you shook one out, you swallowed it. You trusted it. You trusted it because you had been taught your whole life that the bottle was safe, that the seal was there for your protection, that the people who made it and sold it and placed it on that shelf had not done anything to it. Before September 1982, that trust was so deep and so unconscious that nobody even thought to question it. After September 1982, it was gone. And 43 years later, it has never fully come back. In the last week of September 1982, someone walked into several grocery stores and pharmacies in and around Chicago, Illinois. They picked up bottles of Extra Strength Tylenol from the shelves. They took those bottles somewhere. They opened the capsules. They replaced the medicine inside with potassium cyanide, one of the most lethal substances on Earth. And then they put the bottles back on the shelves, in the stores, for anyone to buy. 7 people did. 7 people picked up a bottle, took a capsule, and were dead within hours. The youngest was 12 years old. She had a cold. Her parents give her 1 tablet before school. The killer was never identified, never charged, never caught. This is the Cold Files, and today we go inside the most terrifying act of domestic terrorism in American history, the one that changed how you open every bottle of medicine you have ever touched since that day. It is Wednesday, September 29th, 1982. It is a normal morning in the suburbs of Chicago. In Elk Grove Village, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman wakes up with a scratchy throat and a runny nose. She does not want to go to school. Her parents say she can stay home. They give her 1 Extra Strength Tylenol capsule. She goes to the bathroom. Within minutes, she collapses on the floor. She is dead before the ambulance arrives. Less than 10 miles away in Arlington Heights, 27-year-old Adam Janus is taking the day off from his job at the post office. He has been picking up flowers for his wife. He develops a headache. He takes 2 Extra Strength Tylenol capsules. He collapses within the hour. He dies at Northwest Community Hospital. That afternoon, Adam's family gathers at his home to be with his wife and children. His brother Stanley is there. Stanley has just been married 2 months earlier. His wife Teresa is with him. Teresa has a headache. Stanley finds the Tylenol in Adam's kitchen. They each take 1 capsule. Stanley dies that evening. Teresa dies the following day. The same bottle, the same family, 3 deaths. 3 more people die in the same 72-hour window. Mary McFarland, a 27-year-old woman from Elmhurst, she takes Tylenol at work for a headache. Paula Prince, a 35-year-old flight attendant, investigators find her body in Chicago apartment, a Tylenol bottle on the bathroom counter. And Mary Reiner, a 27-year-old mother from Winfield, 7 days after giving birth to her 4th child. She takes 2 Tylenol for what she believes is postpartum discomfort. 7 people, in a 72-hour window, all dead from the same cause, all connected by a single brand of pain relief, all completely random, Different ages, different neighborhoods, different lives. The only thing they had in common was that they trusted a product that someone had turned into a weapon. When investigators finally made the connection, they had to figure out something that had never been done before. How do you warn an entire city that the medicine on their bathroom shelf might be trying to kill you? When investigators established the Tylenol connection, they moved fast. Within 48 hours, Chicago police and fire department units drove through the city using loudspeakers, warning residents to stop taking Tylenol immediately. Mayor Jane Byrne ordered all Tylenol products pulled from grocery stores and pharmacies. Johnson & Johnson issued a nationwide recall of 31 million bottles. At the time, it was the largest product recall in American history. But the forensic question was just as urgent as the public health one. How had the bottles been tampered with, and where? The answer was both simpler and more disturbing than investigators expected. The tampered bottles had come from multiple different stores across the Chicago area. They were not from a single batch. They had not been tampered with at the factory, which meant someone had physically gone into multiple stores, removed bottles from the shelves, taken them somewhere, opened each capsule individually, poured out the acetaminophen, replaced it with potassium cyanide, resealed the capsules, put the lids back on the bottles, and returned them to the shelves. This is not the work of a moment. This took time, planning, and access to cyanide. Potassium cyanide is not something you buy at a hardware store. It is used in industrial processes, electroplating, metal cleaning, photography. It can be obtained legally by businesses with legitimate industrial uses. It can also be stolen. The killer had it, used it, and got away. Inside 72 hours, the Tylenol murders were the biggest story in America. Every television network, every newspaper, every radio station. The story spread faster than any public health warning the country had ever tried to issue. And the country responded with something that had not been seen since the polio epidemic: total, immediate, visceral fear. Hospitals across the country were flooded with patients convinced they had been poisoned. In Chicago alone, doctors reported thousands of patients in the first week presenting with symptoms they believed were cyanide poisoning. The overwhelming majority of them were having panic attacks. The fear itself had become a public health crisis. Parents threw away every bottle of medicine in their homes. Pharmacies couldn't keep their shelves stocked with anything, not because supplies had run out, but because nobody would buy them. Several cities canceled Halloween trick-or-treating, terrified tampered candy or medicine would end up in children's bags. The Federal Bureau of Investigation received hundreds of copycat threats in the weeks following the murders. Some of them were real. More bottles in more cities were found tampered, none of them laced with cyanide, most of them the work of people trying to get attention or extort companies, but investigators had to treat every single one as potentially genuine. Johnson & Johnson, the company that made Tylenol, faced a crisis that business schools now study as a defining moment in corporate history. CEO James Burke appeared on television and announced the immediate recall of 31 million bottles at a cost of $100 million. He did not wait for legal advice. He did not wait to understand the full scope of the problem. He pulled the product immediately. The decision almost certainly saved lives. It also saved the Tylenol brand, which, against all odds, recovered. But the damage to the country's sense of safety was permanent, and the killer, who had caused all of this, was still out there. 10 days after the first deaths, a letter arrived at the Johnson & Johnson offices in Pennsylvania. It was handwritten. It was from a man who identified himself as James Lewis. It demanded $1 million. It said the killings would continue unless the payment was made. Investigators descended on the letter immediately. They traced the postmark, New York City, October 1st, 1982. And then they found something that stopped the investigation cold. The postmark said October 1st. The first major news reports about the Tylenol murders had been published on September 30th.
James William Lewis was convicted of extortion in 1984. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He served nearly 12, including pretrial detention. He was never charged with the murders. He was not quiet during those years. From prison, Lewis corresponded extensively with investigators, journalists, and lawyers. He offered theories about how the crime could have been committed. He gave interviews. He was, by all accounts, fascinating to talk to. He was also, by the assessment of almost every person who dealt with him, a deeply manipulative man who controlled every interaction and revealed nothing he did not choose to reveal. In 2009, the FBI reopened the case. They executed a search warrant on Lewis's home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They found handwritten notes, books about poisons, and documents suggesting an ongoing interest in the case. They obtained a DNA sample from Lewis. The results were inconclusive. No physical evidence directly linking him to the tampered bottles was found. In 2022, Arlington Heights police released 2 videotaped FBI interviews with Lewis from 2008. In those recordings, investigators who watched them described Lewis as making what they called incriminating statements, not confessions, but the kind of specific, detailed knowledge of the crime that could only come from someone who had been involved. Lewis appeared in the Netflix documentary Cold Case: The Tylenol Murders in 2025, shot before his death in 2023. He denied everything, calmly, completely, without hesitation. He said he would not hurt anyone. He died in July 2023 from heart and liver disease. He was 76 years old. He never confessed. He never broke. And with his death, many investigators believe the most realistic chance of a formal resolution to the case died with him. In the early days of the investigation, a tip came in about a man named Roger Arnold, a dock worker, a local regular at several Chicago bars. Someone had overheard him at a bar talking about killing people with cyanide. Police searched his home. They found unregistered firearms, chemistry kits, and books about poisons. They did not find cyanide. They could not formally connect him to the tampered bottles. He was not charged. Roger Arnold found out that a bartender had turned him in as a potential suspect. He became consumed with rage. He decided to find the man who had betrayed him. He stalked the bars. He waited. One night he saw a man leave a bar he believed the bartender frequented. He followed him, and he shot him. The man he shot was not the bartender. It was a 46-year-old computer consultant named John Stanisha. He had nothing to do with the Tylenol case, nothing to do with Arnold, nothing to do with any of it. He had simply been in the wrong bar on the wrong night. John Stanisha became, in the words of one investigator, the 8th victim of the Tylenol murders. Roger Arnold was convicted of Stanisha's murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. He was never charged with the Tylenol murders. Ted Kaczynski. In In 2011, nearly 3 decades after the murders, the FBI made a request that surprised almost everyone following the case. They asked for a DNA sample from Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. The reasoning was specific. Kaczynski's first 4 Unabomber attacks had taken place in Chicago and its suburbs between 1978 and 1980. His parents had a home in Lombard, Illinois, a Chicago suburb, where he had stayed in 1982. He had the technical knowledge, he had the access, he had the history of wanting to cause harm through seemingly ordinary objects. Kaczynski denied ever having possessed potassium cyanide. His DNA was tested. No biological material from the Tylenol investigation was found. He was ruled out. He died in prison in June 2023, the same year as James Lewis. Both men who investigators believed might hold the answer, gone within months of each other. There is one person still alive who investigators believe knows more about this case than anyone else. Her name is Leanne Lewis, the wife of James Lewis. She was there for all of it. She was with Lewis in Chicago in September 1982. She fled with him to New York after the murders became national news. She was by his side when he was arrested. She waited for him for 12 years in prison. She was with him when the FBI searched their Cambridge home in 2009. She was with him when he gave interviews for the Netflix documentary. And in 43 years, she has not said a single word in public about the Tylenol murders. Not to investigators, not to journalists, not to documentary filmmakers. She has not responded to interview requests from the Chicago Tribune, from Netflix, from WTTV, from every reporter who has worked on this case since 1982. Investigators believe she knows. Whether she helped, whether she knew in advance, whether she found out afterward, she has had 43 years to speak. She has chosen not to. The case file in Arlington Heights, Illinois remains sealed, officially open but inaccessible to the public because it is an active investigation. The investigators responsible for it have to call the FBI for permission before releasing any information. The families of the 7 victims are still waiting, still fighting for access to the evidence, still asking why a case this significant, this well documented, and this urgent can remain unsolved for 40 decades. Here is what I believe after going through every piece of this case. I believe James Lewis knew something. The postmark problem is real. His knowledge of the case was specific and intimate in ways that do not fit a man who is simply an opportunist reading the newspapers. I believe Roger Arnold was a violent and dangerous man who was in the wrong place with the wrong knowledge, but the lack of cyanide in his home and the failure to connect him to any tampered bottle means the evidence against him is circumstantial at best. I believe Leanne Lewis is the last living person who may know what happened, and I believe that when she decides to speak, if she ever does, this case ends. And I believe that what the Tylenol killer left behind, the thing that outlasted all of them, is something you touched this morning without thinking about it. Every tamper-proof seal you have ever opened, every safety ring you have ever snapped, every foil wrapper you have ever peeled back, all of it exists because of 7 people in Chicago, and 1 person who was never caught. Mary Kellerman was 12 years old. She had a cold. She wanted to stay home from school. Her parents gave her 1 tablet. She deserves an answer. Her family has been waiting for 43 years. This has been the Cold Files. If this case kept you watching, hit the like button right now. It costs you nothing, and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who deserve to know these stories. Subscribe to the Cold Files. Every week, a new cold case, a new story that history tried to bury. Turn on the bell notification because the next case we are covering is one most people outside of one small country have never heard of. It involves a family that vanished, a farmhouse no one would enter, and a mystery that is almost 100 years old. I will see you next week. The file never closes.